The Big Light presents
It's been so shameful, it's kind of like, oh, just shut up and get on with it, I kind of feel really sad about that and angry too.
My name is Halina Rafai, and this is the A Sonic Hug podcast. Over the coming episodes, you're going to hear the voices of people from different walks of life who deal, experience and battle mental health issues. In this, the penultimate episode of Series 3, I speak to Jude Stewart. Originally from Dundee and now based in Glasgow, Jude is a psychotherapist. Some people might know Jude from her remarkable work with Girls Rock Glasgow, which provided rock music education and social justice for girls and non-binary young people aged 8 to 16 years old. You're going to hear Jude's experiences leading up to and going through the menopause and the effect it's had on her mentally. There's discussion related to suicidal ideation that people may find difficult listening. This is Jude's story.
Menopause started to really rear its ugly head, I'd say, in 2017. I noticed a change, and it's funny, they call it the change, but I never really knew what to expect, what kind of change, and I just sort of noticed a change in my energy and my ability to sort of cope with everyday things. So I've been through a lot in life. I've had a lot of unsettling things happen, a lot of bereavement, a lot of trauma, and I've, dealt with it all pretty well. And then this was different, things that were quite small were kind of sending me over the edge. And I just noticed that there definitely was a change in my kind of mental health. And I did think, am I menopausal or perimenopausal? What is going on here? So yeah, it was really noticeable. And there was a flatness sometimes. And then at other times there was quite a disturbance. Yeah, I will say it, suicidal, and thinking, why am I feeling suicidal over this when, I've survived much worse? So that was really interesting. Experiencing these sort of changes and they weren't hormonal changes, I guess, because I was on the mini pill, I'd been on the mini pill for years and I didn't have a menstrual cycle. It wasn't anything to do with bleeding that alerted me to the fact that, something was different and changing. And I kind of, definitely was feeling, moodier or flatter and just a lack of energy. Then I sort of checked my age and I thought, I am at the age where, I could be menopausal. And then I started sort of asking members of my family, female members, what their experiences of menopause was. And because I don't really have a lot of family or, sort of female members who are still alive, I didn't really get very clear answers. People were saying, oh, just use a bit of sage, or I just battled through it. Nobody was really kind of talking my language or kind of sharing experiences I could relate to. So, I think it was just sort of luck, really, hearing articles and people talking about menopause on daytime TV, Lorraine Kelly saying that she'd experienced this flatness. I really related to that. And I thought, okay, so it's not to do with my bleeding or anything that feels particularly hormonal, but it's definitely like a sort of a thing that's descended on me. And I did think, right, okay, check this out. Cause I work in mental health. So self-care is part of that. And I went to see my GP, and an older female GP that I've always loved and respected. And she just said, have some antidepressants. Being offered antidepressants, I wasn't going to sniff at it. I think they can help some people, but I was curious again to see if it was going to help. But I also felt really let down and disappointed. I thought, oh God, is this all that I'm going to be offered? And again, it made me feel like a bit of a failure, not knowing enough about menopause or not knowing what I could do to kind of help myself. And I gave it a try and noticed absolutely no improvement and was still having sort of like, a lack of energy. And I was having increased IBS issues and I didn't realize that that can be part of the menopause. And I sort of had to take a break from my counseling work. And because, just trying to manage everything was really hard. So I felt quite disappointed that that was all the kind of support or information I was being offered from my female older GP. I went back, I think probably 6 months later, and saw another female GP and got a really similar kind of reaction. Oh, just take some antidepressants. You're too young. I think I was like 40, sort of 48. Was I too young? No, in fact, I wasn't when you look into it. Again, I just struggled on. And then I started talking about it all with older female friends. And that was, a revelation, so that kind of changed things for me, so family, GP weren't really helpful, but an older female friend from Dundee, Pauline Hind, a musician who, passed away recently. She was amazing. She gave me information about HRT and was the first sort of female friend that talked about it openly. So thank goodness that, I had someone that I could really discuss it with. She had been in the Dundee sort of feminist kind of band Vive la Hystérique and always, included feminism in her songs. And I just think, of course it would be Pauline who put me on the right track. So I went back to my doctor's practice and the only appointment was with the guy doctor. And thought, okay, I've tried 2 female doctors. What's the harm in trying to get some support from this dude? So my dude doctor, he kind of listened to everything I was experiencing, the hot flushes, the low mood. And then he asked his magic question, which was, how's your sex life? How's your partner coping? And I was suddenly aware that he was probably assuming lots of things, that I had a sex life, that I had a partner, and he was probably assuming that that partner would be male. And he seemed very concerned about this partner possibly not getting the leg over. And I went with it. I lied and met him energy-wise in my concern for this aspect of menopause. And I had been on the mini pill. I'll just say I'd been on the mini pill for about 10 years after having horrendous periods. And the mini pill basically took away my, sex drive, which was fine. After years of a sex drive, I was suddenly like, 9 again or something, like, ponies. I wasn't missing it. I was getting lots done. I wasn't dating, and it was fine. I was somehow quite happy. But it was so interesting that this was his angle on the menopause, that my sex drive was non-existent. So I just said, yes, it's terrible. It's really affecting my relationship. And that's when he referred me to the Sandyford Menopause Clinic. He was so worried about that. His attitude didn't make me feel angry or shameful. I think I was too fucking, excuse my French, desperate to just have someone take me seriously. I was kind of like, fine, if that's where you want to go with this. In retrospect, it's horrendous. It's horrendous that is what, made him want to support me. This idea that, something was really badly missing. That was his sort of projection onto my situation, I guess. But I was just like, whatever it takes to get some attention. And of course, I got referred to the Sandyford and they did the tests. And guess what? I was menopausal. I hadn't been lying. I hadn't been making it up. I didn't even know there was a test that they could do to prove then. I thought they could just maybe listen to me. And then, I was offered lots of hormones and HRT and even made a plea for testosterone, because that deals with brain fog, but it also improves your sex drive. Things did start to, improve definitely within a month, not sort of drastically, but just feeling a wee bit more together. I mean, I don't know. Was it placebo effect? I don't know. I could do things with a wee bit more ease. And this would be, I'd say, sort of 2019, but sort of later in 2019. So while I was still trying to put things in place, I guess I was peak menopausal and I was struggling with brain fog, getting my sentences together, organizing things that had usually been quite easy. I've always winged it. I've always been able to sort of talk kind of spontaneously, and it was sort of losing my marbles. I felt like I'd been hit by a large mallet. I always think of Timmy Mallet and his big foam mallet, and like someone had sort of banged me over the head and I'd lost my smarts. So my smarts came back, I'd say, towards the end of 2019, because earlier in that year, I was super busy and I was thinking, I can't do it. I can't do anything. I can't get my act together. I was doing the last sort of wee run up to Girls Rock Glasgow. I was doing a lot of outreach stuff, and I just lost my ability to sort of chat to people. And I'd taken a break from counselling. So in hindsight, that was a really wise thing to do. It was a sad thing to do, but it was really wise. So it was a struggle. So sort of coming out of that was really, really good. Coming out of that sort of menopausal fog, getting on the HRT was quite a relief. Energy wise, I was still a bit low, but it was a definite improvement. HRT worked for me. It doesn't work for everyone. I'm just so grateful to be able to get HRT on the NHS relatively easily. I know other friends, have struggled to get it in other parts of Britain, even other parts of Scotland. So since kind of having my revelation that I was actually menopausal, and then HRT was helping, I've just been a complete motor mice about menopause, and really trying to support my sisters and support anyone really who's dealing with hormonal stuff. It's not just women who go through menopause, so it's just this whole world of hormones and what they do to us. So I've been kind of just sending articles to people, talking, just opening up the chat, making it a thing, boring younger women with it. Why don't we know what we're in for? This is what's crazy, all this kind of like, oh, you're bleeding now, you're a woman. And then what happens at the other end of that? Do you stop being a woman? Do you stop being useful? A lot of women do get suicidal when they're menopausal, because just the timing and the feeling of stupidity, it's very frightening. So being able to reassure women that this is a thing, is not just them, and being able to help inform them, supporting them and really kind of pushing to get support from, their GPs, that has become really important to me. And I think I've been really lucky with the timing, because right at the start of COVID, I got it, and I now have long COVID. And it has affected me, the long COVID. Sometimes I forget to take my HRT, and sometimes I take too much of it. So sometimes I'm walking around feeling like I'm sort of 9 months pregnant, like a big bubble of estrogen. And I realize I've got about 20 patches on. And then other times I'm really kind of scatty. And then I realize I haven't taken my HRT for a couple of weeks. Had I not had the HRT in place before the pandemic, God knows what and where I'd be. I think I'd be really struggling. So just grateful that it kind of worked out for me. I've never been a mad fan of Davina McCall, but the work she has done on menopause has been fantastic. Just being able to say to people, oh, watch this, and their lives change, just kind of realizing that they're not alone. You need to do your own bit of research. And even within the menopause, we're quite individual. So if something doesn't work for you, don't feel like a failure, just look elsewhere. And yeah, some menopause sites are full of shite. They're kind of really presuming that you're a certain kind of person or, that your femininity plays out in a certain way. I just have some curiosity. Yeah, you have to feel like you deserve it, I guess. And that's hard, if it's an embarrassing thing. But, it should be taught in schools. It should be addressed in workplaces. People should know what it does to you, what it does to female body. It's a really, really physical thing that then affects you emotionally and, mentally. It's been so shameful, it's kind of like, oh, just shut up and get on with it. I kind of feel really sad about that and angry too. But yeah, when you get to the place where you just want to retreat into your cave, it is hard to be flying the flag at the same time, So anyone who's got that energy to do that, I'm very grateful to them because I really understand that need to tell everyone to get to and just do your own thing. Yeah, because again, that's really interesting. You have less energy and maybe it's an invitation to use that really carefully. So it's not a completely bad thing, menopause. It's just a thing. The way the world frames it, that's the difficult thing. I think menopausal people, women are angry and tired and for good reason. So why should we be freaking taking care of everyone? I trained when I was becoming a therapist. I trained in perinatal depression, that sort of postnatal depression that you can experience while you're carrying a baby. So, I had some personal experience around that, and that really informed my work and made me passionate about people having access to support, I guess, sort of hormonal health and how it can affect you emotionally and mentally is always been something I've been involved with. But, the menopause is relatively new to me. So, I'm learning all the time. I'm sort of hearing different experiences and really trying to help people explore what their options are in my work. I was furious actually when I was training. We had a lecture at Strathclyde about the main things that affect mental health, and they didn't include hormones. And I thought, you're really missing a huge population, So if I was younger, I would be doing research into hormonal effects on mental health. I'd be doing research in a meaningful way, I think, for women and people dealing with hormonal changes. I always invite my clients to kind of go where they want to. I don't share my own experience, but I do share my knowledge of what can affect people hormonally. It's good to have people's backs in that way and go, no, actually, this is important. Yeah, I was able to do that in my perinatal depression work. So it's great now being able to do this with the menopause. And I love my work and, I'm quite scatty in life, but I can concentrate for a good hour when I'm listening to other people. And I love hearing about people's experiences. Everyone's so individual, but then there's certain kind of universal things that we can all relate to. And yeah, it's important that people feel witnessed, understood, and that they can start to make choices about how they want to be supported in life and, who they want to tell and what they kind of want the world to know about them, whether that's just telling your partner what you're going through or explaining to your kids what you're going through and doing it without shame, like women are invisible, we're supposed to hide all evidence of bleeding or, suffering or, and the menopause is the same, but the thing is you can't really hide the menopause. You can't really. I think you'd have to put on a pretty good act to hide it. In the past, I've just gone, ooh, she's a bit moody or she's become a right bitch. And for a reason, your body is doing the opposite of going through puberty, coming out of it. And that's pretty big, isn't it? Everywhere in every community, there should be a space where people can get information and actually get hormones. And I know, there was an organisation, I think, in the East End of Glasgow that made the news. A group of local women got together I think in a library, yeah, we should be doing that more. Maybe, coming out of this pandemic, people can gather a bit more easily now. And yeah, I would be encouraging people to organise and just talk, to communicate and share and not be ashamed of the struggle, not think that you're the failure because you're not coping. But it's such a huge thing, because the way menopause affects the brain, it can leave you feeling really kind of discombobulated. So again, it should be other people setting these things up, not the discombobulated themselves. If you are feeling that change and if you're noticing that flatness and you're not sleeping and you're sweating and you can just tell something is different, just keep going to your GP, keep demanding, boring everyone's shit list, just keep talking about it. Know you have a right to support. Some people sail through menopause. Well, that's brilliant. Yeah, good for them. But most people don't get in a position of feeling that you deserve support. And hormones are so easy. There shouldn't be a blooming problem getting them, and if there's all the different kinds of hormones, get something that suits you. And, they're even doing research now looking into hormones, HRT for women who've had breast cancer, so don't feel that you're at the end of the road. Keep exploring and keep demanding. And I know that's hard to do when you're tired and you've just survived a pandemic and you're feeling stupid or whatever because of the brain fog of menopause. But yeah, just hang on in there, please. Keep demanding for yourself. You deserve it.
That was Jude's story. I started to do my own research into the menopause as I get older, especially as my mum started at the age of 40. So there was always a concern for me that I'd end up on the same path, not knowing enough. Jude summarises her symptoms and side effects simply, which is what we do need and what she passionately advocates for. The changes, she calls it, the lack of energy, the hot flushes, the low mood, the mood changes, the feeling of losing your mind and the brain fog is all extremely difficult. And it might seem to people that when they hear these terms that they don't seem too bad, but you have to think about these things at times on an extreme scale. For example, hot flushes can leave you sweating profusely, they cause anxiety and are extremely uncomfortable. Low mood can also lead to suicidal feelings, as Jude experienced. I really like the way Jude explains about the importance of how this is the opposite of going through puberty, which again places how significant it is. It does all come back to stigma though, and it always feels, certainly as a woman anyway, that anything pertaining to our bodies feels significantly more stigmatised as the world is arguably dominated by men, and always has been. I do wonder what it would be like if there was more balance, or indeed if it was the other way around. Whenever the subject of hormones, our periods and the menopause comes up, you can often feel the tension and uncomfortableness. And that may come from A, it not being talked about enough, and B, the fact that people simply don't understand what it is. And as Jude asks, is it shameful because we are women? I can't believe that I'm surprised that it took Jude 3 visits and her having to pretend to be within a certain unit and experience in order to get a referral. We often talk about the pressures on our NHS and GPs, but if Jude at the age of 47 years old and within the traditional age bracket of being menopausal, and including displaying symptoms, had been referred immediately for a test, the alleviation on services would be notable. If you multiply that experience by a larger number of people, then you do the maths and figure out the impact. More importantly, the further pressure on Jude's mental health, the exhaustion, doubt, disappointment and frustration caused could have been dealt with far earlier. It always seems to come back to the argument of prevention versus cure, and perhaps if things had been looked at earlier, it might not have affected Jude in the significant way it did. Now don't get me wrong, there might be certain reasons why those first 2 GPs didn't refer, but surely all the signs were there. We then come on to the third male GP and his questions regarding Jude's sex life, the impact of her supposed partner and the assumptions made. At what point I have to ask, is that okay, without not exploring someone's situation first before making said assumptions? All of these things add up in terms of experience, and then comes as no surprise why people don't want to proceed with trying to get a diagnosis when it comes to menopause. We all have to do our own research, as Jude says, and I'm so glad she identified that we are not being educated enough from an early age when it comes to hormones. The impact that they have on us, whether it be as a teenager, through pregnancy, through miscarriage, with periods, in later life, is all extremely testing. There are moments for many when they slip into a different persona and feel completely unable to cope. So why are we not embedding this into our conversations more? I love what Jude says about setting up centres and groups to lead the way and encourage people to talk more. It sometimes feels like the hardest thing to begin though. As Jude says, you have the right to support, and her advocacy around the subject is amazing. Because I hope that you might be a young woman, an older woman, a partner, a friend, a son, a daughter, or someone that simply wants to know more, and that from listening to this, you start your own research. If you have experienced or are experiencing anything described in this episode, you will find support information in the text to accompany this podcast. A Sonic Hug is recorded, edited and produced by me, Halina Rafai. We are also part of Scotland's podcasting network, The Big Light. Until next time, deep breaths.
From the Big Light Studio.